everyone, and welcome once again to another episode of Magic of the Heart Cave. My name is Brendon, here with Lacey, the Paper Druid, Mystic Spider-Man. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We got a lot of new people who are tuning in for the first time, and for this episode, we thought that it would be really exciting for us to be able to share a little bit about our stories of awakening. So this is going to be a full-on conversation between me and Lacey. We've had this discussion before in some ways or another, but again, considering that there's people who may not fully know who we are, who are still getting introduced, we want to be able to take this opportunity to just not only be able to share with you, but for us to also be able to reflect ourselves. And so with the intention of this podcast, of this project in general, Magic at the Heart Cave, this is all about being able to help collectively find our ways back to that magic of the heart cave, back to our heart. So we hope that in us sharing our story, it helps you also see yourself within our story, or to be able to reflect or relate, or perhaps even just be able to expand and shift a couple paradigms along the way. So yeah, I'm super excited about this. Are you excited about this episode, Lacey?
Yeah, I think this is a fun one to just kind of like revisit and like go through our memories and just kind of see why we are who we are. And, like gives people an opportunity to maybe reflect on their own journeys, even like the parts of ourselves that were like, oh, like, did that serve me? Those kind of things. So, yeah, I'm excited to talk about some fun experiences for sure.
Yeah, totally. So before we dive into this, thank you again to everyone for your support in all forms. If you guys would like to be able to help continue to support this project, simply sharing it with a friend, leaving a comment is super appreciated. Of course, we also can direct you to our PayPal, and you can find that in the link in the info for this. And you can also check out our Patreon, which again is a monthly membership. And then through there, we also have additional things that we do, such as ongoing events that you can be a part of, our ongoing dream classes that we're going to be starting up again soon, conscious media creator circles, as well as access to some projects that are in development. So thank you to our Patreon supporters. Thank you to everyone. And yeah, with that said, let's dive into this episode. So the stories of our awakening, I think before we even get started, going all the way back, it's important to even just take a moment of reflecting on, well, like, what does awakening mean? What does it mean to us, and then from there we can kind of like reverse engineer. And I think it's interesting because even kind of going back to last episode when we were talking a little bit about like Rudolf Steiner, and how he talked about how every 7 years we're kind of like shifting into a new stage of consciousness. I think we can see that how from the perspective that I hold of things, it's I've talked about it before, but you'll hear me talking about it again. But this is a concept I refer to as a reverse time theory, and what I mean by that is basically the idea that who we are now as individuals was in us as children, was in us as young teenagers, as young adults, and everything like that. And so it's, if you're thinking about it from the perspective of the universe, it's like, okay, for the average person, it's kind of like becoming this kind of like not necessarily middle age, but like within like 20 to 30 years, you're kind of at this point where maybe you found yourself around that time. It seems on average it kind of takes like it's like somewhere around your 30s, it feels like you kind of like start to find yourself. But like throughout there, you're constantly continuing to re-find yourself and to reawaken. So it's like how does the stages up to this point, how has it kind of like allowed us to become who we are? And with any story, again, there's highs, there's lows, there's twists, there's turns, and there's a lot of synchronicities along the way. I'll just say real quick for me, and then I'll pass it over to Lacey. I think for myself, my story of awakening, I guarantee you Lacey's is probably more exciting than mine. I'll just say that, just putting that out there. But I think for me, and this is kind of how I relate on to it, my story of awakening always stemmed from curiosity. As a young child, I was always curious. I was always curious about how things worked, about trying to be able to explain things, about trying to be able to understand the mysterious. Even since I was a young child, I was always attracted to things like the paranormal and UFOs and aliens and Sasquatch. And I was just, whether or not I fully knew it, the idea that there was something more, that there was something that we didn't fully know, that there was something yet to be discovered, I always remember that really intrigued me. And so I feel like that was kind of the universe's way of gently kind of like pulling me along or leaving kind of like cosmic breadcrumbs along the way. But yeah, how about you, Lacey? How would you explain, again, not even just your journey of awakening, but I'll go back to what I originally said. What is, what is awakening
is
to us? Yeah.
I guess like awakening is the act of remembering. I don't necessarily I think, we're born awake and we kind of lose touch with that depending on our like environmental situation, socially and stuff. There's a lot of things on the path that can, I think, lead us off, but that's kind of like we've talked about that. That's the whole reason, is to lead us back to the path of remembering, awakening. So yeah, I just think that we're all born awake and we kind of forget. But yeah, I think for me personally, it's always been a major part of who I am. I think that in my journey on like in this incarnation and like, while I'm here this time, it's always been a part of me, even when I felt like maybe slightly detached from it. So for my like you were talking about your interests as a child and stuff, when I look back to just how I kind of was like observing reality, even as a young child, as young as like 2 and 3, I was very aware of the energetic fields. I was very like observant of nature and even like fractals before I even knew what fractals were, or patterns. I think I noticed them in the trees and in just like nature. But I didn't have the words to fully describe like, what is that magic? Like, what is that? So as I, grew up, I naturally gravitated towards things that were, I guess, like otherworldly. So definitely interested in like paranormal stuff, like UFOs, very young as like 5 or 6, which we can touch. Like I had some UFO experiences as a young child. A lot of paranormal experiences for me. So it really started in this like lifting of the veil. Like I had this sensitivity. I was very open to the other dimensional spaces before I even knew what that meant. And I was curious to explore them. So I did pretty extensive exploration as young as like 6, I'd say, with like paranormal stuff. Around 9 is when I started to do a lot of in-depth dream analysis and dream exploration.
At 6 years old.
At 9.
At 9 years old.
At 9.
Yeah.
I was like remembering my dreams as early as 6, like and before even as early as 3. But I didn't start like recording them and starting to like explore them as a means for this other type of space that I could access, like the higher dimensional space, Akashic records and stuff like that. I didn't know what that was, but I was seeking it without my knowledge. Like that's the only way I can explain it. I was like, there was like this magnetism, this pull to go there, even if it was scary. And there was a lot of scary stuff that happened because since I was so young, I didn't necessarily have the tools to strengthen my own field. And there were a lot of things coming towards me. I became a bit of a gravity well for crazy shit to go down, like weird stuff, unexplainable stuff. And I can share a couple of those stories. If not today, maybe we can do another paranormal like episode, because I have a lot of stories. But yeah, so that's just kind of like the basis of that when I was young. And then it just like, it got more intense. I started to really dive into paganism and witchcraft and ritualistic stuff as around like 9 or 10 as well. And then
it's just the average things a 9 and 10-year-old would be into.
I know.
Yeah.
But
pagan summon circles in the forest and stuff. And
I thought for sure that I had some ability to, like, as when I was young, we've talked about this, like I was convinced I could levitate or I could move things with my mind when I was super little. But then I kind of lost touch with that. And then around 10 or 11, I started to practice more like I was just like very in tune with this like subtlety field. It's the only way I can explain it. You could like tap into it. And when you're a kid, like you're so much more in tune with it. Like it's psychedelic. Like you don't even need psychedelics. Like you're there. Like I remember this one experience where I was with a couple of friends and we used to bike all over the city and go to the forest. I spent a lot of time in the woods as a child, and this particular time we biked out to this abandoned warehouse area, and we used to hang out there a lot, and it was dangerous. I don't know, it was like a bridge and it was like not for kids, but I was like 9 and we went out there, and I just remember us doing a circle, and I kind of was like, we should try to like summon like some like rain or like you know, like some elemental like wind and rain,
something harmless, like
harmless.
yeah.
And so we all sat there in a circle, and like they were into it. I was shocked that they would want to do it, but they were curious too, and children naturally are. And it was crazy. I remember like huge gusts of wind started to blow. We were in like a field, and there was like all these trees around us. Like it was really, really open. There's the Thames River. There's no one around. Like we're in the middle of nowhere. But huge gusts of wind started to like blow through, and we were like convinced. We're like, we did that. It was fun. It was cool. But anyways,
so cool.
It was like testing our like, almost like we were meditating, like we were dropping into ourselves. We were listening, and we were speaking to the earth. And like that was like,
that's real, man.
The first those were the first experiences of awakening for me, was like that something's bigger than me, that things have consciousness. Like I even believe trees were conscious, and I still do, but like I was very sensitive to tree energy and like trees and stuff. So I spent a lot of time in the woods, right?
Makes
so
sense,
yeah. So that's just the beginning. That's like the start.
Small part, yeah.
And then I'll just lead into like probably like the biggest shift, and then I'll let you talk. Was around between like 12 and like 16 was probably like the biggest spiritual shift for me. I was obviously raised predominantly Christian. Like both my parents were, I did go to church and stuff like that. So my pagan ways were kept secret, of course. I wasn't allowed to share that. I did
your blasphemous ways. Yeah.
I did end up sharing that with my mom in high school. And she was kind of like freaked out by it because of like what people would talk about, like what witchcraft is. Even though I practiced like white, like earth magic and stuff, I didn't do anything like malicious or dark or anything. It was quite the opposite. And working with like fairies and like stuff like that. But yeah, so between like 12 and like 16, I started to dive into like obviously marijuana and a bit of psychedelics like mushrooms, and LSD came a little bit later. And those really kind of catapulted me into a deeper depth of awakening that I think I was always seeking.
A deeper depth of remembrance too.
Yeah. It was like, which we'll talk about. I'll let him talk first before I dive into that specific experience. But in high school, I was at that point wanting to know more about reality, more so than ever before. Not only reality, but like, who's Lacey? What am I? Like, what is consciousness? And I started to learn, like, you know, go to the library and take books out about quantum physics and string theory and just like more sciencey stuff. And I wanted to feel more well-rounded with like my understanding of reality, because obviously I know from my own perspective and like my own experiences, but I was like, what are like these experts? What do they think it is? And I found a lot of weird comfort in some of those scientific like understanding, and that even like planted seeds. Like I felt, you know, learning about these like quantum, like that like blew my mind. And then I was like obsessed with time travel and like like time specifically. So obviously like a lot about Albert Einstein and relativity and all of that stuff. And then I dove deep into like philosophy and just like people questioning reality, that just was like, yes, like other people are there too. And like, if we can like bounce off of each other, we could like come to some conclusion of like, what is this? Like, what is this place we are in? Like, what is this? And yeah, all of that was happening. I was like very sensitive and soft and sweet and shy and very artistic, and loved poetry and expressing myself through art. So that's where I am today. I made me who I am as well. And then yeah, I just got more and more deep. Like, I didn't say no to it. The call was there and I just answered it. I just followed it to where it eventually led me. So yeah, which was around like 17. So
yeah.
So
plenty more still to
stories, but those that's just like the basis of like me. I like me exploring reality. Now you could get more in depth. Like, I obviously my upbringing was not great, so
but the circumstances of that almost like directed you towards more like independent thinking.
Independent thinking. And well, my dad was very like, even though he was like, I guess like quote unquote like Christian, I think he was also just a seeker. And he was a deep thinker as well. And we would have conversations about like all sorts of weird stuff. So my dad was definitely, I think, even my mom, like my mom's also really sensitive. She says that like, she believed like parts of her family, like there was like clairvoyance and psychic people in her family, which I also believe too. And she thought that maybe that I like had a little bit of that. It's so funny because it's like they were Christian, but like they also were, curious about this like other way of thinking. And so I think even though they may have, other belief systems, they still kind of planted seeds within me to kind of go there myself. And I just kind of went with it. I just like ran with it. So cool. I'm grateful that they are curious people as well.
No, that's again, like with anything, like we're a byproduct of our environment. So I mean, just having the people around you, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, kind of encouraging that is always going to kind of move you towards that direction. But again, it's interesting because like we've kind of talked about it, it's almost the soul in itself kind of has like a story that's created for it even before we experience it, or perhaps like we have experienced it, but now we're kind of like playing it out. But we still have this free will that kind of like allows us to kind of like weave through it at various paces, whether it's like immediate from A to B, or we take a little detour, but eventually we still get from A to B, which is a whole conversation about like free will and destiny, and maybe that's another episode. But yeah, it's fascinating again, just kind of like hearing your experience, because for me, and every experience is different, and every journey of awakening is different. And again, I think it's acknowledging the fact that like we are like constantly in a process of awakening. There is more to awaken to, which is the beauty of this reality. And exactly what Lacey said, I think, even when I was kind of like going through a pivotal moment in my awakening, which honestly was like closer to like when I was about like 19, 20 and things like that. Not that there wasn't stuff before then, but for me, and looking at mine kind of from a non-linear perspective, for me, it just kind of makes sense. But I remember coming to the understanding of realizing that like so much of what I was going through wasn't necessarily learning things that were new, but were remembering things that were already like connected into like a piece of my soul or my bigger consciousness, or and really just kind of like opening up to that idea of like what the soul even is. And I remember kind of like just really feeling at home with the idea of acknowledging the fact that yes, I am Brendon here in this physical body in this incarnation, but just kind of like allowing my heart to open up to this bigger story that, but like, who am I beyond this body? Like, what's my bigger story? Who am I as a soul? And not just who am I, but what is my purpose? Like why am I Brendon this time? Who was I previously? What am I here to do? And so I think with the journeys of awakening, a lot of it from my experience was a process of kind of like almost like kind of like piecing together a puzzle where there's a lot of kind of like connecting the dots and various aha moments. And for me, like a big part of my awakening, one of the stages of it was when I traveled out to Vancouver, and even then I was already starting to get curious into things. But in Vancouver, I was there for an internship with school, and I was at school for like media production. And I remember like being in Vancouver, and as I was there, it was my first time kind of living on my own. And so I spent a lot of my time just kind of, like naturally just kind of like putting the intention out there for the universe to start like kind of like bringing things into my reality that I could continue to learn from. I spent a lot of time in the back of bookstores reading like, parapsychology books, or just like
Mm.
sitting there and finding like weird, like, books from the 70s, like all about like psychic abilities and UFOs and life after death. And that was always the thing that, even for me, kind of with Lacey, my grandfather was always someone who was very curious. and
Mm.
and even though like I don't feel that he immediately, like he did have conversations with me when I was older, but I just know that, like a lot of like my own curiosity is kind of like not even just like something that I was around, but something that was just like a part of my nature to begin with. Like I found out later in my grandfather's later years of life that he had like huge collections of like parapsychology and life
Oh,
after
wow.
death stuff.
Okay.
And so at that point, I'm just like, oh wow, like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree,
Absolutely.
I come from a line of seekers,
Yep.
so to speak. And I think that's a very fascinating thing, because, when you start looking at this from like the bigger perspective, we're not just starting this lifetime purely from scratch. Like we actually like come into it with like a
Mm.
suitcase full of, like parts of ourselves that we have yet to discover, we have yet to like reconnect with. And that can be like latent abilities like clairvoyance and things like
Mm.
that. In Lacey's case, it's not like you just learn that. It's like something from a past life almost comes with us into this incarnation. And I think in a lot of ways that can literally just be kind of like the draw towards something, the curiosity towards
Yeah.
something. So, I think for a lot of us, we just find that that's a part of our nature, is to naturally seek this. And when you think about it, why do we do that? I think, when we're talking about our story of awakening, we're literally talking about the story of awakening, which
Yeah.
is, call it the hero's journey, call it what you will. It's source, like returning to itself. It's the dream awakening to itself, is something that I talk about. So, in the same way that a plant will seek the light, we too are seeking ourself. And we're constantly doing this, whether or not we even have like a way of actively describing it. It's just, our nature, like when we're just kind of in our heart and in our space, I feel like we're constantly kind of like seeking to know thyself on a personal level, as well as know thyself on more of like this like cosmic
Yeah.
citizen sort of level as well. But going back a little bit to when I was in Vancouver, the for looking back on that, like that was such a powerful catapult, because as I was there, like I started having these synchronicities where I started, eventually, there was like a very specific moment where, like I was spending a lot of time writing in my journal, and I was going down to the beach just by myself, and I'd met a few people, but no one that I was like super like talking about like crazy stuff with. And then as I was sitting there one day, I was just like drawing a picture of a tree and reflecting on how trees are like these like fractal symbols of reality, and like literally acknowledging the as above so below right in front of me, and just learning from trees. And then in that moment, there was literally a girl who, I think she like walked past me once, and we kind of like saw each other, and immediately I could just tell, I'm just like, oh, like she, like there was something different, there was an energetic thing. And
Mm-hmm.
then like a few minutes later, she actually came back, and she just approaches me like full confidence, and she's just like, hey, like, she sees me sitting there writing on, sitting on a bench writing in a journal by myself. And she obviously kind of like picked up on my energy, and she
Mm-hmm.
she walks up to me and she says, hey, can I ask you a question? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And she's like, do you want to help change the world? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like who is this? Like, tell me more, right?
Yeah.
And then so this girl, Vanessa, we ended up having this conversation, and then she was actually like there with her boyfriend, and basically in that moment, they were like kind of like the first people that I met in my entire lifetime that were like real hippies, like real life hippies, and not just like hippies and kind of like the 70s cliche, but you know, just people who were also actively seeking, and people that were
Seekers.
close to my age.
Yeah.
And then that night we ended up just like hanging out that entire time, and all the way, like we didn't even go to sleep that night. We were just like ended up like finding some backyard with a trampoline in it. We were like laying on a trampoline all night and just like looking up at the stars. And again, this is in Vancouver. And just I just remember like talking to them about like just like the craziest stuff, like every single thing that I was curious about, just kind of like was something I was just like, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about aliens? What do you think about spoon bending? What do you think about dreams? What do you think about life after death? And all these conversations. And so to have that space where some other people were just like, yo, like this is it, this is the soul mission. And we were talking about that, you know, we were talking about the bigger purpose, and we were just like that's, for me, a big part of my awakening was connecting with this idea that there was this bigger story. And the bigger story still is this collective shift in consciousness, this collective remembrance, this collective awakening. And so through that process, a lot of it for me was this idea that, you know, if I'm remembering things through my own experience and within my own heart, then I know that it's in other people too. And at that point, it actually began to inspire me to create what would eventually become the evolution of Paradigm Shift Central, which again, was and is this project that I've fostered over the years, that is basically about bringing people together who are actively helping assist with the shift in consciousness. And through that, I was beginning to kind of like connect with my identity and my purpose. And I was like, wait a second, like here I am going to school for media production and stuff like that. Like I can totally like use my skill sets to continue to plant seeds, to continue to help bring things to people's attention and start pointing them, you know, towards like their own curiosities and create that space where it's fostered. And I was already doing that at school. I was already like, you know, into weird stuff. People already knew me as that, but this was just like took it to another level. And then while I was out in Vancouver, and I'll share this and then I'll go back to Lacey and we'll come back to this in kind of like a two-parter kind of thing, because it's fascinating. You know, for me, when I was out in Vancouver, the synchronicities kept on happening, and I was like having what I felt was like direct communication with the universe, where I felt like there was a feedback loop, where it felt like I wasn't limited to my own brain. Like my consciousness was literally expanded, and everything around me was me. And I was kind of like testing it, and I was using symbols and numbers, and like 9-6 was my resonating number. And I was like, you know, like use 9-6 as a symbol to kind of like communicate with me through synchronicity. And, you know, for an example, it would be like, I go to a yoga class and I like stand out of the yoga class. And as I walk to the edge of the curb, I look up and the first car that drives by has 9-6 on the license plate. What are the odds? But in that moment, you know, that was me realizing it was just like, whoa, like, you know, like right place, right time. Like this is something bigger. Like I'm in a flow. I'm in a stream of consciousness. And I was starting to understand that by being in my heart, the universe was leading me towards something. And so this was a very powerful stage of my awakening that also led to a deeper place of confidence in knowing that, you know, like if I keep moving towards this bigger intention, and this bigger intention is serving other people and serving community and bringing people together and telling stories and creating media and creating opportunities for people to explore this curiosity themselves, which is exactly, you know, more of what this is as well. The universe would have my back. The universe loves courage, to quote Terence McKenna. And then just to end it off here, as the synchronicities unfolded, as I was in Vancouver, it actually led up to the point of me actually experiencing DMT for the first time on a beach during a sunrise on the last day that I was there. So like, you know, for those of you who are a little bit familiar, like DMT is one of the most like potent psychedelics, and it's like has like kind of like a crystal base, and you can smoke it, is one of the ways that you can ingest it. A lot of people would know it through like ayahuasca, but when ingested, it's like this incredibly potent psychedelic that literally just like completely just pulls the veil off. I'll talk more about that in a bit, but that experience for me, and it wasn't my first psychedelic experience. I had mushrooms and stuff prior to that when I was like 17, 18, but that experience for me, like totally just took it to a whole nother level,
Yeah.
but not in a way where it was purely just like fascinating, but in a way that it was also affirming. And it really showed me a little bit more about like what this reality is, and how others could also kind of like come to this realization themselves. But yeah, I'll pass it over to Lacey. And I know, because again, at this point, segueing from maybe like psychedelic stories to more psychedelic stories, Lacey kind of was talking about how when you were, you know, in your teenage years, you started to open up to more ways of connecting with the universe that amplified your awakening as well.
Exactly. And wow, love just hearing you talk about that story.
Thanks.
Beautiful. Yeah, so for me, it was definitely, I didn't know much about necessarily synchronicity. And even though I feel like synchronicity followed me and I was like maybe in tune with it, but not fully conscious of it. And obviously after my aha moment, that's when synchronicity really became a major part of my life. But yeah, for me, I had dabbled with mushrooms and marijuana in high school, and it was mostly just recreational use, you know, just like shooting the shit with friends and like going to the bush bashes and stuff and like just getting high and just whatever. So I didn't really have necessarily a doorway for me to access those spaces just yet. But it definitely gave me, like, I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed like the thoughts that would come into my mind, and the, you know, the inquisitiveness of it. Like I was like starting to map out my own consciousness when I was high. I don't know if other people do that when they do psychedelics, but I would have like an internal dialogue, and I'd be having a conversation with my higher self before I even knew that, like, I'm talking to me. So you know, fast forward, I think it was before my 18th birthday. I had started doing LSD pretty frequently. The scene that I was in was a group of people that were, I think, seekers in their own way as well. A lot of musicians. So we all play music, hang out, get stoned. Good times, honestly, some of the best times of my life. And yeah, so with my partner at the time, he's a seeker as well, and he was curious about just like we did our first, oh my gosh, our first date, we did mushrooms together, and that was a time, and we realized that we vibed, like we seemed to be like seeing reality in a similar way. So it was comforting to know that there was someone else that was like there with me. And so me and him did a high dose of LSD, just the two of us. And that was just like life-changing. It completely, I guess you call like ego death. It completely eradicated like my whole sense of self.
It's like it annihilated it.
It annihilated who I thought I was.
Yeah.
And I thought I knew who I was at that time, which is silly. But like, as someone that's always kind of followed my own, like, beat of my own drum to an extent, like I've always kind of been a bit of an oddball and like liked weird stuff. But like I still had so much of the societal pressure to fit in, to be liked and stuff like that. And I found during that psychedelic trip, it completely dismantled my identity. I had a huge identity crisis, but it was like absolutely life-changing. It was beautiful. It was scary, but it was so beautiful. I finally, like, once I took away those layers of all these masks and things that I had put on me, I was free to access this well of information, this code from the higher dimensional space that was there. And then I downloaded it. Like, quite literally, I could feel a higher consciousness, like something, I don't even know how to explain it, was like, okay, you're ready. You're a blank slate. This is what we needed. And here you go. Boom. And they just like put it all in my head. And it was crazy. I just remember sitting there and like all these like realizations, like I was like, whoa, yes, I remember. This is what it means to be a soul, a consciousness. I was like, holy shit, like I am more than just this physical body. I am the universe, and I'm witnessing myself right now. And it was just like so fucking crazy. It was like I burst out laughing. I was crying. It was like wild. And not only was it wild, is that my partner also was accessing it. We were doing it together. So it wasn't alone. Like we woke up together. We were looking, we're like, whoa. Like we were like, holy shit. We remember. And we're remembering together.
That's awesome.
And it was like, I felt a love like I never felt, completely like hold me and love me. And at that point, I was like, what do I do now? And what do I do with this information? Because back then, this was like in 2007. And, you know, I didn't know anybody that was accessing that. Like I had no, like my friends, and like I said, like they're seekers, but like they just weren't in that same place. And that's okay, right? But like I was seeking other seekers. I wanted other people to be like, hey, yeah, like I've been there. I've had experienced a holy moment. Like I know, you know, I know what it means and what it feels like. So
holy moment. That's the term that I know we're very fond of here.
Yeah, because that's what it was.
Yeah.
You know, it was divine. It was, you know, what, you know, some sages and like shamans and people would talk about being like, it's God, you know, like it's sacred. It's this thing that we all have in us, like Brendon was saying, but we don't have access to it. And sometimes psychedelics can get you there pretty quickly. There's other ways to get there through meditation, even through near-death experiences and stuff.
And through dreams, which
and
we'll
through
talk
dreams.
about more. Yeah.
So you don't have to do psychedelics to get there or anything like that. But for me, it was just a quicker way there. I could explain, you know, like the
universe had big plans for you.
The universe was like, yes, like we've been waiting for this moment. And I was like, and then after that, I went through, maybe some people would say like psychosis, but like, it wasn't like, that sounds bad, but like I was in that energy for like a solid year. Like I had a hard time relating to other people because I didn't know what to do. Like I felt like I left fragments of myself in that higher space.
And that was after like consecutive LSD trips, not just one, or?
I did so after that, like really awakening moment with LSD, I started to study it. I started to use psychedelics as medicine. It was no longer a recreational thing for me. It became a sacred act to access that space. It was a doorway. And I took it very seriously. Like I was like, if I'm going to do it,
like it's a
psychonaut. Yeah. And I would call myself that for sure. At the time. And I was studying plant medicine. I was reading up everything I could learn about like ayahuasca, DMT, different types of mushrooms, LSD, MD, like any type of psychoactive drug. I was like mapping it, like ibogaine, like any of it. Like I had to know about it. What does it do to your psyche? How does it?
Reading it, not necessarily doing all of them.
No, I wasn't doing all of them, but I was just like wanting to learn why are these doorways and what is it showing us? And like, I just needed to know about the spirit of the plant. So that became a big part of like my journey of just like getting to know what that all meant, and still taking the journeys with my drug of choice at the time, which was LSD, because it was my my waypoint, I guess, to those spaces. And so over the years, I would dabble and more would be uncovered. Even more like crazier, like
experiences. It comes to us as we're ready.
We're ready.
Know? Like that's
once I was like clear, like once I was like clear and like had that whole experience, I found now when I entered the when the veil was lifted, I guess, and I would enter those spaces, I now could see things for what they truly were. So I was seeing consciousness in all forms, in everything. Like everything was alive and everything had some, like the earth is almost like a, how do I explain it? Like a, what am I trying to say? I can't even think of the word. Like a USB. Okay, yeah. Like there's thousands of years, hundreds of years, however old this planet is, it has absorbed everyone that's ever lived here. Everything that's ever been is encoded in the earth, and we have access to it. So when I would go to those spaces, I could communicate with them in some way, not through like actual standing there and chatting with each other, but like they were there. Their spirit was there. They were angelic, like higher beings. They were like so stunning, so beautiful and pure. There was ancestors. There was like all sorts of different types of creatures, like cat alien beings, and like it's crazy. Like they're all there, and they and you can communicate with them, and they have messages for you and stuff. So that's when I started just really diving into it, and it blended really well with dream time, and like my dreams became even more like crazier than they ever had before. And it just keeps going. Like obviously like the synchronicities, like learning about sacred geometry and like fractals and the nature of reality and like destiny, and like things were so much bigger than me, like so much more bigger than me. And it was for the first time in my life, like I felt like I had purpose. And it's interesting to hear Brendon share his story, because he's just like, yeah, like he's on the beach and he's like meeting these people and he does DMT and he's got this whole experience and it's beautiful. Hear him, recall it. But he knew, but I didn't know necessarily how to use what was given to me. I felt lost for sure. I didn't know what to do with this information. I didn't know how to share it without sounding like a total fucking nutcase. But I knew that they were giving it to me to share. They wanted me to share it, and I just didn't know how.
I mean, you say they, how, like they meaning
Yeah.
the higher dimensional,
the council,
like the council. Oh, the council. Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
We call it the council, the great council.
Yeah.
These beings
that are very invested in,
they're invested in
here.
our evolution of our consciousness, the planet's consciousness, because it also carries it. We are on a spaceship flying through, the universe. And I feel like when people wake up, they're like, oh, like that is the purpose of being here on planet Earth, is to awaken, and to remember. So when one of us does, they're like, now you have to pass this on. You carrying the torch.
It's bigger than you.
You have to pass the torch on. And I felt
you are the ripple effect.
Overwhelmed by this. It was scary for me, because I am I hide myself a lot, and I feel like that was such a big thing to hand to me. I was like, are you sure you want to give that to me? I don't know if I'll be able to pass that on. Like, I don't know. It was just scary. So if you're in a place in your life right now where you've just awoken and you're remembering and you don't know what to do with it, community is the best place to, I think, just kind of feel like, you're not alone, and that it's okay to feel this way, and it's okay to not know what to do with this information. It takes time to integrate it. It took like a good year for me to integrate the first experience, let alone the ones that came after. And just really trying to, whatever makes sense for you. Because I know for Brendon, like he built a whole community around like what his experience was, and obviously that's how we end up together. That's how one way where we actually synchronistically met each other. But yeah, like
my purpose was to meet you.
It definitely was. Yeah. Which we've shared before, our
And
story.
we'll talk more about that in more episodes.
Yeah.
Like our like divine, like kind of
which is
connections and
wild to
all
think.
that, and
Yeah.
our own shared psychedelic experiences. Because I think again, it's just like I know we can get into those, but I think that'll probably
we could go for hours conversations. But
yeah.
I think, you know, yeah, just finding like community and just like really trusting where this path is leading you. Easier said than done, but definitely following your heart and really leaning into your heart and being like, there's a reason why I'm going this, like being led this way.
Yeah.
And it was just beautiful, and it still continues to be beautiful. And, you know, remembering is a continual act. You'll find times where you feel very far from that version of yourself, or I just, you know, I think there's always going to be continual deaths and rebirths as we're here to newer versions of ourselves. You know, even if I think back to like that first, like real, like boom, like here you go, like I'm a totally different person from then, but she still lives inside me. But it's like I've died so many times since then. I mean, I've had 2 babies, so that's super psychedelic and a major death as well. And I mean that in the sense of just like, yeah, like the old ways dying, or the old parts of you dying. I don't know if I want to use that word, but just like being laid to rest.
Yeah.
Because they're not serving you anymore, and you need to move into this like more like better avatar, this better version of you, right? So in order to do that, you have to lay things to rest, and that can be hard, but it's a part of the process of remembering and awakening. You can't do that without that. Some of my biggest like crazy moments were pretty dark in the sense of like introspection. They were not, you know, wow, there's like, it's like, I think I've told you like the freaking monkey gods and stuff, which was amazing, and they're pouring love into me. But then
you've told me about the monkey gods. You haven't told them about the monkey gods.
I've like experienced where it's one of my probably favorite like psychedelic experiences, where I was on a beach and I was like surrounded by people, and this is like up in Quebec, and it's like in the middle of the forest, and
during a festival.
Yeah. And everyone was like naked and running around, and I was coming up on quite a bit of LSD, and but I was open and I was nervous. I got so anxious when I'm about to enter that space. I'm like, damn, what's gonna happen? Like, what are they gonna tell me? Like, where am I going? And I have to surrender, because like I can't fight it. If I fight the flow, I'm going to have a bad time, but also I'm not going to be able to receive what is meant for me. So I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to like move my body. I'm going to like and I would turn into this younger version of me, where I was like very playful. I had no shoes on. I was in my underwear. I probably looked a little weird, but I was like running around, having the time of my life. And I was on the beach, and I think I like peaked on the beach for sure, and everything was breathing in the water, and I was like, I'm going to go in the water. And so I'm in the water, and everything's like, whoa, like you could just feel the earth, you could feel everything was alive, and you were alive, and it was just like the most beautiful experience. And I looked up at the sky, and in the clouds I saw laughing like monkey gods, and like all different type of very Hindu, which I don't practice at all or anything like that, but they were very like, I could see them as what I've seen in art before. And they were kind of like, you know, just like dancing around and smiling at me, and like sending love to me, and just like like throwing it at me, and I'm just like in the water, and I was like, whoa, this is amazing. And then after they were like kind of shifting, moving out of the sky, there was like elephants and monkeys and all of that. I then saw human beings, like silhouetted, like people swimming. So below, like where we were, like as above, so below, like I could see it mirrored on the sky. and we were intertwining with each other in the sky, like these humans, and they were creating mandalas. And there was like this synchronicity, or not synchronicity, there was like a symbiotic thing going on where they were all connected. And as I was witnessing this, I was like, oh, yes. I was like, yes, yes. Like, that's it. Like, we are all one. Like, we are the same. And I was like, yeah, like, thank you for that. Like, I wanted to feel that inside my heart, that we're not alone. And then I was like, that's it. We're here. And I wrote this whole experience out, like, in a huge document, because of like the lessons that I learned during that trip. But it was like, oh, we come here, we incarnate to it because we are here to feel the feeling of like separateness and aloneness, to bring us back to oneness. So it was like, in that moment, I was like, we're here to remember that we aren't alone, that we are the same thing, that this universal love, there's this love that is permeating everything. And I wept and I cried, and it was just really beautiful time to have that moment of like, they were like, yes, you remember, you got this. And I constantly have to remember that one. I feel like that one is an easy one to slip and not remember, because life is chaotic at times and society isn't built like that. And it's easy to forget that, love is everywhere, and it's in everything, and we're a part of it. So
it's beautiful.
But that was one beautiful trip for sure.
Definitely a major catalyst within your own story of awakening. So no, this is it's beautiful. And again, we're almost coming up on an hour here, and we'll just kind of go with the flow. Obviously, River's just sleeping right now, so we're taking advantage of the time that we are given right now. So we'll go for a little bit longer, maybe even just a half hour if it's possible. But with this, again, it's important for us to be able to reflect back on these stories, because through the process of reflecting back on them, we almost instantly kind of like connect back with the energy of it, and we kind of create this time machine in ourselves where we can bring it forward into the present moment, and we kind of have those aha moments again, and not even just like aha, oh, that's how things are, but like aha, like that's who I am. Aha, that's my connection to how those things are. That's a connection to my excitement and my joy and my passion, and all of the things that kind of like propel us into just like really being able to see the gift that this life truly is. And so when we're going back to the beginning of this episode where we're talking about, well, what is awakening? Absolutely, awakening is the journey of like like separateness and wholeness, separateness and wholeness, separateness and wholeness. It's the breath. It's the constant journey of kind of like awakening and forgetting, and absolutely, it's interesting because Lacey kind of said is like this society isn't necessarily built to foster the kind of like the kind of holding the sacredness of that awakening process. It's not at its priority. So it's important for us to actively be in the act of telling these stories, of not even just telling them through recollection, but to be able to tell them through just like through regular conversation, through art, through creating these spaces, because I think
definitely creating the
containers for them, because again it's powerful to think that just as we've had like this list of all of these beautiful moments of awakening in multiple different forms that they come in, to know that there are still many more still to come. Like even just like the birth of our son River was a part of our awakening process. I awoken into a stage of more of who I am now as a father. And so again, it's this idea that as our journey unfolds, within the seed lives the tree, is kind of the way that I think of it. So like within Lacey, who is 6 and 7 years old, who is just starting to kind of like dabble into a little bit of the curiosity that was connecting her with this idea that there was something more. Flash forward to when she's like in her 20s, and here she is talking to monkey gods, and it all kind of comes full circle, and it's just like, oh, like that's why like the universe is constantly preparing us to be here now, while also understanding that the act of being here now is preparing us for what's still to come. So the best way to prepare for what's to come is to be here now. looks like, oh, River's just stirring. I'll do that for a couple seconds, but we'll bring him in if we need to.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, like with the journeys of awakening that we've had throughout our experiences, it's interesting because it's like when do we consider those moments of awakening? I think we consider those moments of awakening when it's like we're closer to God, we're closer to source. The distance between us and ourselves becomes lessened. We come back to that place of wholeness. We come back to those aha moments. The remembering, literally to remember, take two things and put them together. Remember. So I think of my own experience throughout like growing up and everything like that. And there were many things that kind of like started to kind of like lead me down the rabbit hole and definitely sparked my curiosity and stuff. But I found that, through my own journey of awakening, it wasn't always like these like individual moments, but a lot of it was like like things that would take place over the periods of weeks, over the period of months. It would be like an entire festival that I went to, not just a single moment at that festival. It would be
the full experience, like the
whole experience. And we can kind of start to look at our life in like fractals, where there's kind of like moments within moments within moments within moments. And so if you step back and you look at it, it's just like, well, of course, like our entire journey is one big journey of awakening, understanding that within that journey, it's the ebb and the flow. It's the forgetting and the awakening and stuff. And honestly, like even for us to be able to have these podcasts, to have these discussions, is serving Lacey and I, because through us vocalizing it, it's immediately connecting us back to that energy, and suddenly it kind of like rejuvenates us, and we're just like, oh yeah, like that's who we have been, that's who we are, that's who we're becoming. And it really connects us to, again, the idea that I feel our awakening doesn't just come in through the awareness of this knowledge, but it comes in the integration and then the act of being able to put it into purpose. Like that's to kind of reflect on the interview that I was listening to the other day. Like the goal in life and this is not just me like saying this for myself, but just in general, the goal in life shouldn't necessarily just to be happy. The goal in life should be to be useful. So if we are going through these journeys of awakening and everything like that, again, how do we kind of like reach back and help others along the way, up the mountain, up the place, back to like samadhi, back to source, back to nirvana? Because there's so much more to what we came here to do within this reality. And once you kind of step back and really begin to feel and really begin to like take like that breath, like that, like you just feel it expand. And it's not in our everyday consciousness that we're tapped into that. But in every day, we do have the choice to be able to just like set the intention to connect to that awareness. So, like the awakening process is even just through like the reflection of knowing that it's there. And then through that process, it begins to kind of like create this ongoing conversation between yourself and the universe that will continue to kind of like, dribble in like little synchronicities. And I firmly believe that the universe is doing everything it can to help wake itself up. And so if you're actively putting out that intention to want to not only learn more, but to also learn more about how you too can continue to connect with yourself and then thus continue to connect with others, the universe like has a beautiful way of kind of like magically kind of like bringing things into our path, and especially even in the moments of despair and of darkness and shadow and everything like that. Like it's kind of within those moments that like those two also connect us to a journey of awakening. They also too kind of
some of the greatest catalysts. For sure.
Dark nights of the soul, et cetera, and everything like that. And again, I think there's other episodes that we can talk about where we can dive more into kind of like shadow work themes and everything. But just going back, because again, I'm not 100% sure how much time we'll have here, but we'll just aim to wrap up in probably the next 15 minutes or everything like that. For me, going back to my experience in Vancouver with DMT, what I experienced in that moment was so profound, and what I understood through that experience is that like when I took that like hit of the DMT through the pipe, and I was sitting there with like a couple friends, And then like in that moment, it was almost as if I was like went through like a membrane. Like I had my
Mm.
eyes open, and it kind of like I was traveling. I was traveling without moving. Like it's almost like Dune, where you're kind of like going, but you're still sitting here. And I could
Yeah.
feel like my consciousness kind of like propelling itself, and it kind of pushed through this membrane. And then when it did that, even though I was still physically where I was sitting, suddenly it kind of like everything just kind of like it opened, like my entire consciousness opened. And then in
Mm.
that moment, what I was perceiving would have been almost akin to probably like the peak of an LSD experience, but a little bit different. But what I literally saw, and describing it in human language, was the code of the matrix. And what I
Yeah.
mean by that was literally like it was like infinite fractals of golden light unfolding upon themselves. Like
Mm.
that's literally what I saw. And
Mm.
and it was right there, and it was in front of me. And in that moment, it was so powerful, because within that literal just experience, like it was like I've been here before. Like this isn't something new. Like I've seen this before. Oh yeah, oh yeah, like this entire reality is literally an ocean of energy, is literally made of light. And so again, like the journey of awakening is a journey of being able to understand the illusions that are in place, and understand and to reflect on what our relationships are to those illusions. And we can hold on to the density of this physical reality, onto the Maya, as much as we wish. It's a part of this experience. We can live in the 3D and get dirty and gritty and hug and
Part of it.
kiss and bleed and cry and eat and fuck and all of these things. And that's a part of it. I think it's a part of it as a soul, to be able to come here and to experience the bliss and the joy and the transformation that this journey comes, and the way that we actually get to kind of like choose this adventure that we have, that only for a limited time, so to speak, which is so precious. But
Mm.
again, it's also what I came to understand through this experience. Like there is, where we are is literally just such a small fraction of a much bigger experience, a much bigger like cosmic and galactic experience and multi-dimensional experience, and understanding that there's like other beings that are like observing this, that are a part of this, and they're like kind of like influencing it, and we have this connection, and there's like people that have died who are still with us, and
We are not
like we are
alone.
not alone. And it was
Yeah.
just like, holy shift, like this all just kind of opened up. But it inspired me so deeply, because at that point, even though I had read about it, I had had some mushroom experiences, but nothing to that extent where it fully put me into that space. And it was so beautiful. It was so divinely beautiful, colors that I can barely even explain. I mean, I was walking through it, I was in it, I was touching it, I was fully present. No one can tell me that that didn't happen. It's right up there with like our UFO contact experiences, which we'll talk more about in another episode, if not just touch upon this one. But again, and with that, it was something that inspired me so deeply, because at that point, it was no longer theory for me. It was no longer
You've
something
been
that I
there.
heard Terrence McKenna talk about, or Joe Rogan talk about, or I read about somewhere else. Like it was a direct lived experience that I knew through my own heart, through my own memory, through my own presence. And then with that, again, what I wanted to be able to do was to kind of be able to carry with me the gift of this awareness, and to bring it back into the work that I would be doing, not even necessarily as something that would be like explicitly expressed, but just something that was kind of like weaved into the expression of my art, basically creating that journey that I wanted to be able to help other people connect to, was this idea of reconnecting to the magic of this reality. Because like when I went through that, my awakening process, I was like, holy shit, like this reality literally is magic. Like it is born of magic. Like this physical version that we see here, like it's beautiful, it's real, but it is a quote unquote illusion, in the sense that there's more.
Oh, there's so
There's
much more.
so much more, and this is where you hear stories of shamans and seers and all of these people throughout history that have connected to it in different ways. And again, and for me, it was understanding that like this world that we live in is in turmoil. There's a balancing act of yin and yang, And what I wanted to be able to do was to understand, was to, through my own experience, help people realize is that, awakening is a journey back to the heart. Because
Mm.
when we connect back to the heart, we naturally will remember this. We will naturally reconnect to this. And so, like that was what I wanted to be able to do, was to kind of like take this awareness, weave it into the work that I would do through podcasts, through videos and everything, through stories, and just like be a support system, be a person for someone to talk to, be a place for people to facilitate and join and come together, and for them to be able to reconnect to that magic through their own unique story. I wasn't there to kind of like say like, hey, like spoiler alert, this reality is XYZ and this is exactly what it is. But I know that if I can just help lead them back to a space where they can connect to their heart, their spirit will naturally lead them to their own connection and understanding with the magic of this reality in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
And again, and that's what I feel is so powerful, is that like when we connect back to that, we connect back to an awareness of what sacredness is, of what really being here on this earth is right now, in terms of it being a bigger mission, a gift, again, just like something that is so precious. And to be able to want to be able to help others live through this journey, so that they too can find their way back to a deeper sense of joy, a deeper sense of creativity, to again to awaken as dreamers within the dream, to become better dreamers, was really all it is. So to live lucidly, the journey to lucidity, so to speak. So that's what I feel like. In the same way, we'll talk more about dreams in another episode of this, and we've talked about dreams plenty of times, but there's always more to be able to talk about. Like you can become
Absolutely.
lucid within a dream, and you're just like, whoa, like
Lucid
everything's like
dreamers.
suddenly much more real. Or how
Yeah.
do we bring that into this reality? So like I think yeah, for us, there have been many individual and shared moments that we've had where it's taken us right to the edge, where the veil has kind of peeled itself back, and here we are present. And again, not every awakening moment is going to be a psychedelic experience and things like that. It can literally be a single conversation here right now in the Maya. We don't have to leave
It
this.
could just be someone that
It's
just you meet someone and you have a
it
conversation
clicks.
and
Yeah,
it
something
sets you
happens.
on a path.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, and again, a big part of Lacey and I's personal journey was a shared UFO experience that we had, and
Yeah.
Lacey had some UFO experiences when she was younger as well.
Mhm.
I can go grab River, but let's get close to wrapping this up. So, Lacey, if you want to even just talk a little bit about maybe some of, I know you mentioned some of the UFO
Oh
experiences
yeah, like
and
as a
how
child
that kind of
and
like led
then
into your awakening, and then we'll kind
sure.
of move into a little bit about our UFO experience, and then oh, I guess he's maybe asleep.
He's like flopping
Yeah,
around.
he's just flopping around.
He's slowly waking
He's
up.
slowly waking up. But yeah, because I feel like we'll have to talk more about our UFO experience for like a whole episode, and just like our
Yeah.
thoughts on UFOs and contact and other us's and everything. But
Yeah. Like
and how that continued to awaken us, into
yeah.
more of like our
And that links.
connection of understanding, like who are we?
Yeah, and
I'm
that links.
Brendon. I'm Lacey. You're Lacey. Am I Lacey? Are you Brendan? Are we the same thing? That's a whole thing in itself, right? Like, are we like two? Are we one thing that's split into two
Are we
things?
two parts of one thing?
Yeah, but go ahead.
So cute. Yeah, so just about a little bit about UFOs. Like, for some reason, my mom's side of the family has had UFO experiences. My mom, her sister, um, some abduction type situations. I remember briefly hearing about that in my teens. My mom didn't really necessarily, and my mom had a lot of paranormal experiences too. So, um, the first time I ever saw UFO, actually many, not just one,
Mhm.
I was very young. I was between the ages of 3 and 5. I'm not entirely sure. Wasn't in school yet. Like I was very young. I was at my aunt's house and I was out with my cousin and my siblings, and we were walking my aunt's dog. Now, the weird part about this is like they don't, like, my siblings don't recall this. They were older than me. I was the youngest there. Like everyone was like, my older sister's like almost 8 years older than me. And then my brother's like almost 5 years older than me. So they were much older than me, like old enough to remember, but they don't recall this. So that's an interesting little thing to mention. So anyways, we were walking the dog. We went to there's like on the outskirts of the city. We were on the top of this hill, and I looked up and I saw like there was no clouds in the sky. Just you could see some stars, and it was a pretty clear night. And then I could see as if there was a deeper darkness behind the night sky. Two big, huge, round, circular. They were black, like blacker than the night sky. They blacked out the sky, like the stars. And I thought, I'm like, the sky's opening up. I'm like, do you see this? Like the sky is opening. They all look up, and from inside these black discs, but I don't even know. They look like clouds. They were flew like 20 orbs, like light ships, whatever you want to call it. Like they were flying. They flew out of them, and they were circling these things. And I just remember being like, whoa, intuitively, I knew in that moment, I was like, those are UFOs. And it freaked us out. Like they were definitely freaked out, and we kind of took off. We're like, we gotta get home. So we get back to the house, and I remember we started like, telling my aunt and my mom, we're just like, we saw UFOs, like there was tons of them. So that was my first experience. And my mom recalls me telling her, she remembers us coming in and explaining what we had saw. So she does remember it. So I was like, because like part of me was like, did I dream it? Did it actually happen? Because no one else remembers it. Why am I the only one that remembers it? But my mom recalls us telling her that we saw UFOs. That was an absolutely crazy experience, just the scale of it. So I think 3 or 4 years had passed, and then me and my mom randomly decided to go for a walk down to the convenience store. It was like 9 o'clock at night, but she was like, let's go get a treat. It was late at night. I was only, I think like around 7 or 8 years old. And then we were walking, and in the sky, we saw a very large circular orb. It was quite low, and it was flying weird, like erratically, and it was huge, and it was so low. And near our house, we lived in like an industrial, like near industrial area where there's a huge train yard and like a forest, and we saw this orb like kind of like move, and it was moving so bizarre. And I was like, Mom, that's like a UFO. And she knew it was UFO, and we were both like, what the heck? And so we just watched it for a while, and then it like landed, like it literally like went down into the forest. And I said, oh, we gotta go, it's landing for us.
Typical
Mom,
Lacey.
I was like, no, there's no way we're not going that way. And it was late, like it was late at night. And I just remember being like, that was crazy. And for many years after that, I was always searching the sky. I was like, they've got to be out there. But I didn't have any more like experiences really, like with like UFOs. They were pretty quiet, honestly. Like I didn't see any until our experience. So those are my young years. And then for like, mind you, Dreamtime is a whole other story. I have a very active otherworld life, like in Dreamtime. Like I've flown UFOs, I've been in all sorts of different crafts, and met many different species in Dreamtime. So yeah. But those are just my first 2 experiences.
And how do you, again, just kind of, hi, baby, the baby's awake. Moving again kind of into conclusion of this, and we'll set things up for future episodes where we'll talk more about our UFO experiences and really go in depth about our shared UFO and the initiated contact that was, and the close encounter and the synchronicities
leading into that was just wild.
Oh yeah, and
so much
like
synchronicity.
A craft that was like really close to us and stuff.
Oh, it came very close to us.
You guys gotta stay tuned for that episode. We've talked about it before,
We've
but
done it before.
if you haven't heard us talk about it or you want to hear it again,
Yeah.
then you know it's there to be shared. So
Yeah.
but yeah, just going back to like you having these experiences even when you were younger, how do you feel that kind of like connected back to your awakening?
That's interesting. Yeah. So for me, it just literally was planting a seed in my mind that things were not what they seem. And I think I was like, what are these beings? And I never personally felt that they were malicious. And a lot of the times people freak out and they're having like this very like jarring, scary experience. But for me, with those first two experiences, they weren't direct. Like they weren't necessarily there for me, is the only way I can explain it. They were just there and I happened to see it. But I wasn't afraid. Like I didn't have this fear. My intuition wasn't telling me that like this is like a bad thing. And then you have like media and you have all these things that are telling us otherwise, a lot of movies and a lot of things that are like these are something to be afraid of. So yeah, I think for me, they just really showed me that yeah, things are not what they seem, that reality is, and like the universe is way bigger than just here.
Yeah.
With the whole like one God put us on earth, that whole concept, which I was pondering at that age because of my parents' religious background and going to Sunday school. And so I was still, and that just never fit for me. Like the whole concept of like being like man and a woman and then creation, and it just did not work for me. Like that was like, no, that's not that ain't it. But that even planted a seed for more curiosity. So not only UFOs, but also just like exploring religious beliefs, I think kind of made me continue the path, I guess.
Yeah.
And they're both very wildly different, but they're require you to have not so much proof, right? Like you just have to believe, I guess, unless you do see a UFO, right? Like then you're like, okay, I've seen it, but what is it, right?
Yeah.
So
again, the UFO experiences, which we'll make time for on future episodes in more depth, it's a part of both of our awakenings, because again, you know, it's something that for not just for us but for many people, again, I feel is something that in some ways is kind of like intentionally kind of like synchronized with a human's experience so that it can kind of plant that seed so that it propels them forwards towards more curiosity. What else is out there? Wait a second, like am I not being told everything that's real, and you know what is real? And so, you know, like there's experience that I had in university where I saw a UFO, and then that totally just kind of opened me up to a whole bunch of things. But again, you know, with the experience that Lacey and I had later, for both of us, it really just like opened us up to like more of, you know, awakening, kind of like I said, like through stages of awakening to like more of who we are as like a cosmic person, as a cosmic soul. And so that's where, and I'll just plant the seeds for this, both of us kind of feel that, you know, like after that experience, we kind of have kind of begun to awaken a part in ourselves that in some form or another identifies almost as like an ambassador for this cosmic awareness, for this knowledge.
Yes.
If it can happen to us, it can happen to you. And what does that relationship look like, and how do, you know, what will the human species look like in, you know, like another 50 years, another 100 years? And I think in the same way that we are individually going through these personal awakening stories, we have to look at the fact that the collective consciousness is going through its own story. It's going through it's a very powerful story, and that story, like I said, is a story very much almost as if many of us have kind of come here almost kind of like sleeper agents, where we came here to be a part of the collective shift, but we kind of forgot that we were here. But then we go through these initiation moments throughout our stories growing up that activate. It's not just awakening, it's activating something that was latent. It's nurturing the seed that's inside of us, and it is moving us closer towards our destiny, towards who we are here to be, not just for the sake of like like, just satisfaction and just like entertainment and stuff like that, but who we are here to be, for the purpose of being useful, for the purpose of service, for the purpose of, again, like contributing to the bigger story and the collective shift in consciousness, and helping, again, raise the next generation who will continue to do the same. And just as we've had our own story of awakening, so too will River. And I think, again, as parents who hold our own spiritual awareness, that's what we want to be able to do, is kind of just like foster River towards those moments, those aha moments where he'll connect, and
he finds his way,
and we learn from him. And again, it's powerful to know that in any moment we are always connected with that remembrance, with that source, with that knowledge, with that Akashic field, with that quantum field. And again, if we find our way back to the heart, back to the magic of the heart cave, then like that's where things naturally begin to reveal themselves, begin to unfold. And it's just such a gift to be able to not only experience this experience, but to be able to share it as well. So
it's like the best part.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to have an awakening is one thing, but to be able to share it and to be able to talk about it with other people, it's another thing. So
just connecting, and then it's a ripple effect, and
we realize how common, how similar many of us are, how many of us have many similar stories of awakening.
We do, yeah.
Like, and again, through the beautiful times, through the challenging times, it's all leading us towards something bigger, something, that's again kind of like us becoming who we're here to be. So who are you here not only to be right now, but who are you becoming? Who are you kind of like, what is awakening inside of you? What is growing inside of you? What tree is within your seed, so to speak? So well, for anybody who's listening to this, we'd love to even just invite you to share a little bit in the comments down below about your own stories of awakening, if you feel called to do that in a few paragraphs or less. And we'll get closer wrapping this up. River's ready to get on with the next things that we have planned for ourselves today, as he waves to the camera. He's getting good at that, eh?
Yeah,
he's really taken to this is a new thing. He's really getting good at that. But Lacey, any closing thoughts and gratitude, and then we'll wrap it up for today.
Closing thoughts, I would say, just like which we've said before, it's just like, be open to the flow, I guess, of what the universe is offering, even if it feels like you're off the path. You're still on your way to it. And it's just, life is beautiful and exciting, and we need more people sharing their experiences and collaborating and getting together and making a difference, whether that's in our communities or even just our family unit. Because I'm sure if, say, you are quote unquote the black sheep of the family or whatever, you're like that odd one out in the family, you're making shifts in your family unit as well. You'd be surprised. The conversations I've had with some of my family members, it's been very enlightening to see that they are more open than I ever thought. Even my older brother, who was very much an atheist most of my life, and now is on the path of awakening, which is just so beautiful to see. So you can plant seeds in your family, in your communities, with your friends, and don't be afraid to show people who you are and the experiences you're having. I think that's like just my advice, because I think for me, I really held back so much that I feel really would have benefited people. And I think, so just have an open heart and share when you feel called to share, and look for those synchronistic moments. Follow your it's like your friend said, the mythos of your own story, which is unfolding and is full of like so much magic. So
absolutely. It's beautiful. Well said, Lacey. I think again, just as we move into the conclusion here, it's reminding ourselves that like your story is bigger than you. Your story can become a source of inspiration and a catalyst for others. And I think the best thing that we can do is to be sacred mirrors for one another, to reflect ourselves back upon each other, and to be in that space where we're asking each other questions, where we're inadvertently or indirectly becoming, you know, like the space holders for someone else's catalyst. So I think the journey of awakening is something that is going to look different for every single person. But I think even as you continue to awaken here, is to just be humbled by the fact that you are still on your journey to awakening. Like it will lead you to the moment of your death and beyond. And that's a whole thing in itself, right? Like
we're students
yeah
of life, and
there's
we're
still
both
plenty out there for us to discover and for us to learn and for us to be able to have more aha moments. And I think, again, you know, as we move forward, I think the best thing that we can do is to really just move forward from a place of humility, a place of patience for ourselves, for others, a place of gentleness, and again, in that place of curiosity and excitement, knowing that the universe has plenty more magic to be able to share with us. And we don't, you know, whether it's coming to us or not, the fact is that, you know, it's still here now. And so
yep,
concluding with the kind of synopsis of what this whole podcast and project is, it's found, you know, like right here in the heart, right in the magic of the heart cave. So we hope that this episode has in some way helped you experience a little bit of that journey back to your heart cave. And we're so grateful to be able to be here once again with our co-producer River, who is again such a gem and a huge part of our catalyst. And we got more episodes still to come here. And
yep.
yeah, Lacey, any just closing gratitude?
Yeah, just thanks for being here and being on the journey of life with us all. And we're just happy to be here, and happy that you are interested in sharing space with us. So yeah, lots of love to all of you guys. So.
Awesome. And if you guys have any recommendations for episodes you would like to see us be able to explore topic wise, please feel free to let us know. And your
anything goes.
Your comments are always appreciated. And thank you again just for continuing to support in all the different ways. Again, if you guys are inspired to support financially, you can check out our PayPal as well as our Patreon in the info down below, which will have, again, exclusive opportunities to connect with us in person, online, through these events that we do, and as well as more content that we are working on that you guys help make possible. So with that said, this is another episode of Magic of the Heart Cave, and on behalf of myself and Lacey and little River here, thank you guys as always. And yeah, thank you for keeping the magic alive. So all right, we love you guys, and all the best on your ongoing journeys. So talk to you soon. Take care. Bye. Say bye, River. Bye.